Service, Maybom Commercial, where we help business leaders make wise commercial real estate decisions. Today, we're going to be talking about possibly the most fundamental commercial real estate financial statement, which is the rent roll. So it's probably the most overlooked and underappreciated financial statement in investment property underwriting. And there's probably the only document more fundamental would be the operating statement. So today we're going to be looking at the rent roll, looking at a couple of case studies, looking at some examples, and hopefully improving your due diligence process. So what is a rent roll? So here's a couple of examples. So a rent roll usually looks like a spreadsheet, and there are some common items on it. Normally there's a list of units on it, and you'll see, so this is a triplex, or maybe this is a quad. So you see 4 units. You see the type here for I guess this is a mixed use building. You see the tenant's name. You see the square footage of the unit. You see how much they pay per month. So this is a pretty good rent roll. Let's see, let me find another example. Here's an example of a rent roll that's broken down by building. So you see each building, you've got the tenants, you've got the bedrooms and baths, you've got their names, the rent roll, the rent rate. Here's an example of one. This is a 6-plex. So you see you've got the unit number, the tenant's name, square footage, the unit type, bedrooms and baths. This is a residential. The current rent per foot, the market rent per foot, loss to lease. This is great. So this one is showing the difference between what the market rate is and the current rent, and then lease expirations. So those are some examples. So normally what you want to see on a rent roll is the unit number. Normally you want to have the tenant's last name. I always try to have square footage on there. Square footage is really important because there's a couple of different methods of determining market rent, but probably the quickest one is to take a rent per foot calculation. So, other 2-bedroom apartments that are about 800 feet are renting for $1 a foot. So you would use that as your market rent. So when you're looking at an investment property at a quadplex or whatnot, you would say they're getting 80 cents a foot. The market rent is 80 cents a foot, $1 a foot. There's 20 cents lost to lease. So there's an opportunity, there's a value add here, opportunity to raise the rents. So I always want to see square footage. It's almost always the item that's not on the rent roll. So that's something that you're going to either have to measure yourself, or you're going to have to guess, do your best to guess at it. Having loss to lease, I think, is important on a rent roll. Number of bedrooms and bathrooms, prior balance. That is something that I think is really important to have a snapshot in time on a rent roll of what the tenant's current balance is. And that, I think, it would very quickly show you when there's a problem on a property. So if you see, this tenant here has he's 6 months behind in rent. Are all the tenants caught up? That's important to know. Another item is lease expirations. So are they month to month? Are they all in brand new leases? I think that's important because it tells you the state of the property. How actively was the landlord staying on keeping the leases current, or maybe there's an opportunity for you to, when you come in, you can raise the rents, and if they're all month to month, that would be easy to reposition the property. Security deposits is important. I can't tell you how often I hear of somebody purchasing a property, closing, and at the closing table trying to figure out the prorations and the security deposits and all that. So having a good rent roll will keep you from having that issue. There's almost always a little place for notes or comments, and that's a place where you might write things that that are important to make a note of. I like to have a date on the rent roll. So this is the rent roll as of December 1st or as of March 5th. So now different properties rent rolls will have different items. So like a mobile home park, you would have. For a mobile home park, you might have items like, you might have the serial number of the mobile home. Is it park owned, or is it, is it owned by the tenant? You might have the model number of the mobile home. For apartments, of course, you might have bedrooms and baths. And for you can go from there. For other property types, you might have different items. So what can you use a rent roll for? So when we underwrite properties, when we look at an investment property to purchase, the rent roll is probably the first thing that we put together. And so probably the most obvious reason would be for underwriting for a potential acquisition. Another reason would be that an owner themselves would want to review a rent roll monthly. He or she would want to sit down and look and say, okay, what are my lease expirations? What are my rent rates? What's the status of my property? Anytime you're going to refinance or going to purchase a property, you've got to submit financial statements to a bank. So another major reason to put together a clean rent roll would be for a loan application. So how do you make a rent roll? So most of this information here would come from the lease. So if you are looking to purchase an apartment complex and you ask the owner for a rent roll, let me give you an example of a really terrible rent roll. This is an actual apartment complex that I looked at. I'm going to put my finger over so you won't know what it is. But this is literally, it's 104 units. It's literally what they had on here. The unit number, the rent, their name. Needless to say, this apartment complex had a lot of problems, and they sold it far below what it should have sold. And I think one of the main reasons is that you can obviously tell just by looking at the rent roll that this person didn't have a grip on their complex. So when a potential buyer is looking at this, there's very little information for you to understand what's happening on this complex. So somebody would have had to go and get all the leases and get the information together. They would have had to walk these units or get a floor plan or whatnot to find out, are these 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms? Is $550, is that a good rent rate on unit 303? Is $600 a good rent rate on 507? We'd have to find out. So once you've got the square footages, the bedrooms and baths, you've got their prior balances, you'd have to go and look at the ledger to find out how far behind these folks are. It would take you a fair amount of work to get a proper rent roll done to understand the status of this property. So I would ask the landlord, I would look at leases, I would walk the property and take measurements. Most properties have standard size, so you might know, okay, all the 2 bedrooms are 800 feet and all the 1 bedrooms are the same floor plan. They're all 600 feet. So you might only have to do 3 measurements, to underwrite an apartment complex like this. So let's talk about a case study. So I'm going to talk about a quadplex that I looked at. So this would have been 2 years ago. I got a call from a guy who's got a quadplex and he wants me to look at it. So I asked him to send me his operating statements and rent rolls. He doesn't have them. So that's red flag number 1, is that he doesn't produce or have the ability to create financial statements. And so I asked him to send me his tax returns. And so he sends me his tax returns and his leases. So I asked him for his leases. So he sends me the leases. I figure out the square footages. I create this rent roll, and very quickly he is $500 below where he should be, in the asking rent. So that's immediately a red flag. The next thing is that from his rent roll says he should be getting $2,100 a month, which, is about $26,000 a year. And his tax return says he got $9,000 in income. Now, if we had a ledger, we would have a balance here. And what we ultimately determined was that 3 of these tenants were far behind in their rent, and he hadn't evicted them. So I advised him to deal with his property problems before he sold the property, and that's what happened. So a simple rent roll would have immediately alerted this guy to an issue with his financial statements and with his property. So that's it. So probably one of the biggest lessons from the rent roll is people tend to focus on really complex financial models, but there's a lot of wisdom in getting the basics right. So get your rent roll right. Do it well. So thanks for watching. Again, I'm Jonathan Aceves with Maybaum Commercial. We'd love to hear your stories, your comments, lessons that you've learned in commercial real estate investing. Like and share this video, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.